This is bizarrely on it's not going to get sun here, but bizarrely it's got best signal. Also, you get left alone here, he says, as somebody's coming down. Anyway, I just realised something really important. I watched the film last night, Gold. I think it's 2014. Is it 2014? It's just called Gold. No, it might look, yeah, 2014. It might look like I'm some kind of a show-off with two phones. No. This one has the data contract, but of course doesn't have a headphone slot hole. That one has a headphone hole, so I can actually save energy by watching a film on that phone, which I piggyback. Oh God, somebody's coming by. I piggyback the real change since the pandemic. Nobody's come by here for, well, basically, since I've moved up here yesterday late afternoon. Anyway, so be it. The real change since the pandemic. It's and I hate it. I need, this is permanent. Off and on over the years, I've had little phases like this. I know I started on one subject and I've just riffed into something entirely different, but I think they're linked. Well, everything's linked. The rules of the countryside. I mean, I am in the middle of nowhere. The rules of the countryside is you don't stare. After the pandemic, and this is now entirely, and you kind of hate to say the following, but it's the truth. It's class. It's entirely a class thing. You can tell if you can generally tell. No, you can almost entirely tell, especially in the countryside, if somebody identifies with the sort of upper middle class strata. You can tell they'll have some expensive boots or something like that, the kind of super expensive. Anyway, let's keep to the point. Prior to the pandemic, the rule of the countryside is you would respect somebody else's sort of privacy, just the humanity, the being aside-ness in the countryside. You didn't stare. If you encountered somebody on a place like this, for example, there's nobody else around, if somebody walked up, if my gaze was deliberately averted from them, whoever they are, that was respected. In other words, you've come to the countryside, into a quiet rural place, to commune with nature, or in my case, be quiet but get better signal. This is a good signal pocket, this place. Don't understand why. Anyway, all classes more or less respected that prior to the pandemic. Well, it's actually this last year. It is so. Since kind of last autumn, I noticed it. It's changed. The upper middle class people still have that behaviour if you encounter them on the hills, whilst particularly the working class types, which is the majority around in this region, they now stare a lot. It truly is horrible. Even when walking back and forth along the riverbank, a few miles away, which is the pathway going out of the town, on a proper pathway that people walk their dogs, but it's also the beginning of the office type path. God, there. And I mean that there is I do not know of a place that is more entirely obviously a place where it's only a half a mile out of the small town, 2,000 people, inhabitants, that is the place where anyone who wants to have a quiet walk by themselves or with friends, that's obviously the place they go to just walk and forget your troubles or whatever. And that pathway, what's it on the Shropshire, the gate to the Shropshire Outstanding Natural Beauty Area, whatever, that will have been for decades, probably hundreds of years, the place where, if one chooses to be alone, get out of their small town, go and commune with nature, it's the beginning of a long walk into the hills. But that one, like, they're working class people, or call them what you want, if you don't quite fit in with somebody who they either recognise or are dressed in their kind of, there's always a sports shirt, generally short back and sides, something like that. There's always something, there's a kind of look. If you don't fit in with that, even if you, and I've never done this before in my life, I started to veer. I would clock people walking in the opposite direction. Clock them 100 yards away, and you can tell by the gait. You can really tell by the gait, particularly of the bloke. There's a kind of, I don't know. Anyway, if I saw somebody who you could tell 100 yards away. And that sounds snobbish, but it's like they're working class or middle or blue, working middle class or whatever. Van man, that's what we're talking about. And bimbo woman, they always are these days. I would veer off slightly. Well, if I'm going out up into the hills, I'd veer off to the left, giving myself a berth of like 50 yards. I and I would do it in such a way that it didn't look like I was obviously avoiding them, because there's a field beyond which some people do take their dogs into, with open access into. So it's like, just start heading as if I'm going that way. But still, the majority, even though you're 50 yards away, as one goes abeam each other, particularly the bloke will be, and this is the way it goes, the bloke will be really looking at you. And if a woman's with a bloke who does that, then the woman does it as well. Like, the woman doesn't do it, generally speaking, if they're alone. In fact, the woman kind of does it even more, like, horribly, if with one of these blokes. But the point is that the majority, 90% of people now who one is in the same zone as them in the countryside, they will stare at you now. And this is the last 6 months. It's horrible. Like, why? What? This top of mine, I believe, is 35 years old, even though sadly it's got a candle mark there, a wax mark. I don't actually normally... No, I don't wear this in public. This was my sort of lounge around. I'm not really the sort of... It's a little bit too Deep Purple for me, let's just put it that way. The band. I know, I'm just the same person. I usually wear my non-fancy Berber, or in the summer, blah, blah, blah. I'm exactly the same constant person I've been for 30 years. This behaviour change. Anyway, get to the point. Have I used up all my battery? Right, I've realised something. So this film, actually I enjoyed it, Gold. But it's not too different to the film Tony Erdmann. And then something suddenly hit me, because anybody who knows who I am knows that I thought the gas sounded almost like the gas was on. No, I can't smell the gas. Right. Anyone who knows me knows that particularly was close to my most adored daughter, who for a decade I brought up in a house. No, we had 9 months living in a camp. And she's one of the highest achieving students, performers in London. I brought her up in this setting. So yes. Now, Silas Marner is I always say my favourite book, in that it's also the most, the writer, the writing, or rather the spirit in that book is the spirit I respect. And this is my bed hat that I don't wear out during the day. I only wear it in bed because it gets scruffled. I say that Silas Marner is my favourite or most respected. Oh, there's another vehicle coming. Oh well, my most respected work of literature, and it is. And I say that because it's brave. It sticks finger up to church, aristocracy, etc., etc. Anyway, hadn't occurred to me. So I was thinking this morning, hang on a minute. Just this thought suddenly came to me. This word that I think and write about, well, there's no point anymore, political correctness. Virtually every woman uses this word, the patriarchy. It just suddenly hit me this morning. A day after I am trying to get organised a work of a filmic work on dad and daughter. Gold, Tony Erdmann, Captain Fantastic, all the way back to Silas Marner. There are significant amount of filmic experiences or novelistic experiences about dad and daughter. There is something a little bit patriarchy about that. No, but it's the wrong word. Look at it a different way. That film Gold, in fact, that's the very best example. I wasn't sure about that. It's like, but ultimately, I think it's quite a good film. But there's this kind of seductive little thing between dad and daughter. Now, you never see that between mother and son, or even mother and daughter in a film. It's like society, the culture, uses that relationship, or rather the what's the right way of putting it? The symbolism, the uses that relationship it's not manipulative, but it's like we use it as a thing, a seduction thing into books and films. We don't do it with women and son. Now, if I were a woman, yeah, I wouldn't be too comfortable about that. So maybe I need not to make my film.